Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Of War and Taters by Ashley Chappell, and this is hosted by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Maybe we could find a home for him somewhere. Stanley regretted allowing the words to form before they were even out of his mouth. Isabel ignored him pointedly enough to convey to him by the sheer force of her silence that this was strictly out of the question. She was a champion-level ignorer. Instead, she continued to cuddle the ragged dog that had scampered into their yard and pretended Stanley wasn't there. There are universal rules in the dog kingdom requiring that strays over a certain size looked like a sort of Labrador soup, while those under a certain size were bound to look like a terrier cocktail. This dog was of the latter variety. It came complete with scruffy fur, uneven floppy ears, a fuzzy mustache, and even a patch of what might have been ancient bubblegum preserved in its wiry coat under the layers of muck and grime. There is another tendency of this variety of stray which was especially irksome to Stanley at this particular moment. It was the apparent form of telepathy that enabled these dogs to wander innocently into the one yard on the block where they would find a person who would open up her icy heart to their filthy floppy ears and instantly lavish more physical attention and snacks on them than she had her husband in, well, ever. He just needs a bath. She directed her stern, "This is how it is, so deal with it," voice at Stanley, then turned a very un-Isabel sort of baby voice toward the dog. "Isn't that right, Mr. Cuddleface? Yes, it is. Yes, it is." "Sure, a bath," he replied skeptically. "But I doubt we have enough gasoline to get him clean." Isabel flashed Stanley another one of her patented silences. He looked at his watch. "All right, I have to go before I'm late. What are you going to do with it?" "Well," started Isabel, still addressing the dog directly, "we're going to have a BATH first. Then we're going to get a little leashy and go for a walkie." Even the dog looked vaguely embarrassed, Stanley noticed. "You're really planning to keep that filthy mutt?" "That filthy mutt, as you call him, happens to be Mr. Cuddleface, and why shouldn't I keep him? I can't believe you would have me leave him out on the cold streets to starve to death." Mr. Cuddleface added his 2 cents by panting heavily in the hot sun and belching rather loudly for a dog his size. "See, he's already got an upset stomach, Stanley." "It's probably just indigestion from the last roadkill he ate." He anticipated the throw and ducked under the flip-flop hurled at him. Okay, but I still have to get to work. You and Mr. Cuddleface," he said slowly and painfully, "will have to have your fun without me." Isabel's bored look was a pretty good indication that Stanley hadn't been invited anyway. He sulked his way back into the kitchen to swallow the last of his lukewarm coffee before sliding the final accoutrement onto the uniform that marked his office. He was very ready to venture out into a world where it actually mattered that he was wearing a shiny badge that read Sheriff. Actually, it read Sheriff, but Stanley was not a man to allow poor spelling to interfere with his pride and authority. Only wives could do that. It was one of those picture-perfect late spring mornings that began with a bright and cloudless sky under a gentle, flesh-warming sun. It was the type of beautiful morning where you knew that by noon it would turn into a flesh-melting sun until the clouds rolled in for lunch, for which you'd be grateful until the torrential rain began in the afternoon. Such is the price of a picture-perfect morning. All of the citizens of Merritt were waking up at various intervals, dotting the fresh breeze with intermittent yells for the dog to come in, cursing the paperboy's aim and the occasional honking horn as commuters mingled with the farm machinery on the town's only throughway. Still, not one of them failed to appreciate for a moment that, yes, this truly was a glorious morning. It would be nice to think that even the current residents of the only jail cell in the Merritt Sheriff's Office were also able to enjoy the wonders of nature this morning, but they didn't wake up with any romantic notions like this in mind. In fact, they hadn't even been to sleep at all. They had been too busy working out the details of their latest peace treaty, and all 8 of them were warily gathered around a map drawn on the stone wall with a piece of purple chalk. It was a complete map of the town, or rather something that began as what they thought of as a complete map of the town, until one or more of them had remembered various side streets, alleys, and other points of interest that had been artfully squeezed into the original. "All right," began Tyler. Together, the 8 children comprised the Upper and Lower Jelly River gangs, and Tyler was the leader of the Uppers. "Is there anywhere else anyone can think of that we've missed? We're in agreement that all streets are covered, right? Good. Now think hard. It's important that this treaty covers all possible territory to avoid further fights. And grounding. Tyler, has anyone claimed the dumpsters behind the science lab at school?" Jordan, the queen of dumpster divers, had a vested interest in those. She'd found the coolest parts of her items of interest collection there. "Dibs!" screamed Brewer, the leader of the lowers. I claimed that territory for the Lower Jelly River gang," he continued more regally. What gives you the right?" "Settle down, Beezer," said Tyler. "But yeah, what gives? You've already got the dumpsters behind Mad Mother Hinkle's grocery and under the bleachers at the football field. No, I challenge that claim. It should go to the Upper Jelly River gang." "The HE double hockey sticks it should." A couple of the more sensible gang members clapped their hands to their mouths at Crow's profanity. "You guys got the marsh, Mr. Durbin's goat farm, the orchard, and the stop and go, and all we're getting is trash." "Crow's right. I'm sticking to my claim for the lowers, Tyler. You want to say something about it?" Tyler wished he'd made a motion for a nap earlier. They were so sleepy that it was getting hard to think, but this was probably the most important peace treaty of their lives. Way more important than the one they'd made last week, at least. That one didn't work anyhow, considering they'd left out all the really neat stuff that wasn't right on a road. That, in fact, was what had gotten them into trouble in the first place. The uppers never wandered into lowers territory and vice versa, but there was so much to see that hadn't been officially claimed yet, and the natural response to running across one another on unclaimed ground was to scrap half-heartedly while they both tried to stake a claim. Frankly, he wished he'd thought to call dibs on the lab dumpsters before Brewer did, but it was going to be up to him to lead by example. He was the oldest by nearly 3 weeks. After all, if it was give up the dumpsters or risk getting into another fight, so be it. The lowers could have them. He stood tall and looked Brewer in the eye. "All right, I'll make you a deal. We'll give you the dumpsters behind the lab, but only if you give us the bleachers at the football field at every other home game." This just proves that 10-year-olds really knew where to find the good stuff. The air was tense. There was a sharp intake of breath as the other gang members all edged away from their 2 leaders. If there was going to be a fight, they wanted to be far enough away to effect at least a passable illusion of innocence. Brewer returned Tyler's stare and leaned in closer. Expecting the worst, Jordan closed her eyes and Spike pounded a pudgy fist in his hand, preparing for a fight. Then Brewer extended his hand to Tyler. "Deal." There was a mutual cheer between the gangs as their leaders ratified their latest treaty. At the beginning of their incarceration after school yesterday, they had agreed to call this one the Treaty to End All Treaties. Spike had suggested calling it TEAT for short, but was quickly vetoed by Jordan and Carrie through red faces and giggles. "Well, now, it sounds like some little angels are up and about and ready to get to school." The cheers turned instantly to groans as Tyler's mom popped into the hall outside their cell. The 2 gangs had run into each other during recess yesterday in an unclaimed spot of the schoolyard under the willows and, as per their custom, fought it out. After this latest fight, their parents had called a meeting with Sheriff Stanley and the principal, and all had agreed that a night in jail might teach them a proper lesson. Tyler's mom especially loved the idea and had volunteered to remain and chaperone, not to mention let the occasional poor tyke out for a bathroom break. She had fallen asleep after her 3rd cup of hot cocoa around 1 a.m., leaving the children to complete their plans in private. Now she was back and as big and perky as ever. "Mom, please!" Tyler's moment of strategic triumph had just had a wet diaper thrown on it. Up until this point, the 2 gangs had enjoyed thinking of themselves as a secret war council, and even had to pull out Carrie's pocket dictionary a few times to stay in character. The appearance of Tyler's mom brought them back into a harsh yet dull elementary school reality. "Besides, I thought we got suspended for 3 days for the fight yesterday. Doesn't that mean we don't have to go to school today?" No, dear. Principal Edwards told us that if all of you could make it through a night without killing each other, that you could come right back to school today. You're on parole, so to speak." The gang members flashed their conciliatory leaders a look of irritation. Is it too late? To kill someone, I mean? Oh, now, Spike, you're just being silly. If you keep that up, your parents may just decide to leave you here. I'm sorry, Mrs. Tyler's mom, Spike mumbled as he dug into the floor with his shoe. He wanted to get home before the mighty Rocket Avengers came on that afternoon. Anyway, Mrs. Tyler's mom began, one of your little friends from school got here this morning and he wants to talk to you before your parents start coming to take you home. I'll send him on back. As she walked away, the gangs looked dubiously at one another. They were pretty sure that all of their friends were standing right there in the room with them. They pressed their faces closer to the bars to see the intruder as he came down the hallway. From the guilty corners of every childhood, there was the memory of that one kid with a weird hobby who never quite fit in, always smelled slightly sticky, and was bullied mercilessly throughout adolescence. The newcomer happened to be the one who filled that role in merit. He was technically 2 grades behind the uppers and the lowers, but was already in several of their classes because of his extremely high test scores. The rumor was that next year he was going to actually be in 5th grade with them. Erwin, Carrie sneered, what do you want? Yeah, why are you here? Shouldn't you be at home with your mommy? Crow added. Erwin strode confidently into the place Tyler's mom had vacated. There was still some considerable room left over. Somehow, I just don't feel too hurt by insults hurled at me by losers behind bars. Nice try, though. He pulled his glasses from his face and wiped them with his shirt in the unbothered manner that he'd seen in the movies. It might have looked much more debonair if Erwin hadn't managed to transfer the jelly stain from his shirt to his glasses in the process. He slid them back onto his face and peered at them through the raspberry-flavored smudge. Okay, so back to the first question, Tyler prompted. What do you want? I just thought you might like to tell your side of the story to someone who'd listen. Someone like me. Why? So you can print it in that so-called paper you stick in all the lockers every week? As a matter of fact, yes. He gave up, took his smudged glasses off again, and found a cleaner part of his shirt to use. This is just the kind of thing people want to read. A story of rivalry, jealousy, violence. It's the perfect feud. There was a rare moment of quiet from both the upper and lower Jelly River gangs. What's a rivalry? Asked Crow. What's a feud? Asked Beezer. Bub, the ever-quiet and thoughtful upper, spoke up. A rivalry means that we're against each other, and a feud means kind of the same thing but worse. He means that we really hate each other and want to hurt each other. Well, that's just dumb, added Tyler. We don't hate each other. He accidentally glanced at Carrie and turned crimson when she smiled at him. He continued regally. We don't even really want to hurt each other. We just fight because we have to. Why? Erwin asked innocently. This favorite question of children was positively aberrant to them when used against them. Tyler was obviously upset. Brewer came to the rescue. Because we have to, that's why. We're lowers and they're uppers, so we have to fight. But we don't mean anything by it. So, Erwin dug into his back pocket to get his grubby Mac Johnson notebook. Mock was his favorite Rocket Avenger. What you're saying is you only actually fight because you're in 2 different gangs. Would you say it's because you're from different environments as well? The gang members looked at each other. They thought that was apparent. Only 2 of them even lived on the same street. The others lived up to 8 whole streets away. Well, duh, offered Spike. That's good stuff, really good. Erwin didn't quite know what that meant, so he hoped no one asked. It was just what the really good journalists on TV always said. Would you also say that your parents raised you to treat some people differently from others? He scribbled notes in his book. More consternation. The uppers and lowers also thought this was obvious. Some people they had to call sir, ma'am, and mind what they said, but sometimes you could call them by their first name even though you still had to mind them. Just like rotten old Jessica the babysitter. And everybody knew talking to strangers couldn't be tolerated at all. Carrie chimed in. Okay, double duh. Yeah, don't you know anything? I think you should go home now, Erwin. Our parents will be here soon and we'll have to go to school. Tyler wasn't sure why, but he felt uncomfortable about the questions Erwin was asking. All right, but it's your loss. If you don't want the world to know your side of the story, I can't force you to talk. If you change your mind, you know where to find me. His dramatic exit was ruined by the fact that Jordan was sticking her tongue out and making an L shape on her forehead with her fingers. It occurred to him that maybe these things only went so well on TV because the other people knew what was expected of them when the suave journalist or detective came to see them. It was just possible that the world would be a better place, he thought, if more people watched as much TV as he did.